Blind dog leads worshiper to safety during church fire. A divine intervention. In a small, tight-knit mountain village nestled among rolling hills and lush greenery, life moved at a peaceful, unhurried pace. The village was home to a community that shared not only the quiet beauty of the mountains but also a bond of deep faith and camaraderie. At the heart of this village was Maria, an elderly woman whose presence was as steady and comforting as the gentle stream that ran through the valley. For decades, Maria had been the soul of the local church, a place that stood not just as a house of worship, but as the center of the community's shared life. Maria was a woman of small stature but immense warmth. Her wrinkled hands spoke of a lifetime of labor, yet her touch carried a tenderness that reflected the kindness of her heart. Her modest home, perched on the edge of the village, was a humble reflection of her means, but it was always open to those in need. Whether it was offering a meal to a hungry traveler, comforting a grieving neighbor, or helping mend frayed relationships, Maria's life was a testament to her faith. She was known to the villagers not just as a devout worshiper, but as a living embodiment of compassion and service. Her devotion to the church was unparalleled. Maria could often be found polishing the worn wooden pews, tending to the small flower garden by the altar, or organizing meals for those less fortunate. Despite her age and frail body, she never hesitated to lend a helping hand, driven by a faith that seemed to renew her strength every morning. Her efforts were tireless, her prayers fervent, and her belief in God unwavering, even when life presented her with trials. One such trial came to her doorstep years ago in the form of Rex, the blind dog who had since become her constant companion. Maria had first found Rex tied to a post outside a neighboring village, abandoned and mistreated. His cloudy eyes were lifeless, his ribs visible beneath his matted fur, and his spirit seemed crushed. Yet Maria had seen something in him, an inner spark that had not yet been extinguished. Without hesitation, she had brought him home, nursing him back to health with a patience and love that mirrored her care for her community. Rex's blindness, while a limitation, did not prevent him from forming an extraordinary bond with Maria. Over time, he became her shadow, following her every step with an uncanny sense of connection. The villagers marveled at how he seemed to know Maria's every move, staying close as if he were her guardian rather than the other way around. Though he could not see the world with his eyes, Rex's loyalty and sensitivity suggested he saw something far deeper. He was her silent confidant, her protector, and her source of comfort during lonely nights when memories of her late husband and grown children weighed heavy on her heart. For Maria, Rex was more than just a pet. He was a reflection of her own life, a life shaped by hardship yet marked by resilience and love. Just as she had saved Rex, Maria often felt that Rex, in his quiet, watchful way, had saved her too. His gentle nudges reminded her to rest when she worked too long. His soft whines seemed to echo her prayers during moments of uncertainty. Together they shared a connection that transcended words, a bond rooted in trust and an unshakable sense of purpose. In the eyes of the villagers, Maria and Rex were inseparable, a pair that symbolized faith and perseverance. Children would often stop by to pet Rex, their laughter filling Maria's small yard as she watched with a smile. Adults came to her for advice, drawn by her wisdom and the sense of peace she exuded. Though her own life was far from easy, Maria never turned away anyone who needed help. She believed deeply that her purpose was to serve others, trusting that God would provide her with the strength to carry on. The church, a modest wooden structure with a single steeple, had been Maria's second home for as long as anyone could remember. She had been there through weddings and funerals, baptisms and celebrations, her steady presence a source of comfort for all. The villagers often spoke of how Maria seemed to carry the spirit of the church within her, her faith shining like a beacon of light, especially during times of trial. Though she had grown older and her movements slower, Maria's heart remained as steadfast as ever. Even as age crept into her joints and her eyesight dimmed, she carried on her work with the same devotion that she had shown all her life. For Maria, serving the church and her community was not a burden, but a blessing, a way to express the deep gratitude she felt for every moment of her life. And at her side always was Rex, a blind dog who seemed to see the world more clearly than most, a faithful companion who embodied the love and grace Maria held so dear. Together, they were a reminder to the village of the power of faith, love, and quiet perseverance in the face of life's challenges. Maria's life had been shaped by both joy and hardship, her journey woven with experiences that deepened her faith and strengthened her resolve. She had grown up in the very same mountain village, where her parents had instilled in her the values of kindness and humility. When she married, her modest home became a haven of love and warmth. Together with her husband, she raised three children, teaching them the importance of compassion, faith, and community. Life, however, was not without its challenges. Tragedy struck early when her husband fell ill and passed away, leaving Maria to raise their children alone. Though grief threatened to overwhelm her, Maria clung to her faith, finding solace in her prayers and strength in the belief that God's plan, though often mysterious, was always for the best. Her unwavering devotion carried her through the hardest days, allowing her to face life's struggles with quiet courage. As her children grew older and moved away to start their own families, Maria's role in the village became her focus. She poured herself into serving others, extending her maternal care to anyone in need. When crops failed, she organized food drives. When illness swept through the village, she sat by the sick beds, offering comfort. Her life became a testament to the belief that faith without action is incomplete, and she took every opportunity to embody the love and care she found in her relationship with God. It was during one of these quiet moments of service that Rex entered her life. Maria had come across the blind dog by chance, abandoned and broken outside a neighboring village. His fur was matted, his ribs showed through his emaciated body, and his clouded eyes told a story of neglect and suffering. Despite his condition, Maria saw in him a spark of life, a flicker of hope that she could not ignore. With the same care she offered her neighbors, Maria brought Rex home and nursed him back to health. Though Rex's physical sight never returned, his spirit blossomed under her loving attention. He became her constant companion, a presence as steady and comforting as the faith that guided her through her days. Over time, Maria began to see Rex as more than a pet. His blindness, far from being a limitation, was a powerful metaphor for her own spiritual journey. Just as Rex navigated the world without physical sight, relying instead on instinct and trust, Maria had long learned to navigate life by trusting in God's unseen hand. Their bond deepened with each passing year, a relationship built on mutual reliance and understanding. Rex's gentle nudges when Maria faltered and his unwavering loyalty mirrored her faith, reminding her that true strength often lies in what cannot be seen. Together they became an inseparable pair. Maria, guided by her faith, and Rex, guided by his trust in her, walking side by side through life's uncertainties with a quiet, shared determination. It was a calm, sunlit Sunday morning, and the church bells rang softly through the mountain village, calling the faithful to gather for worship. The congregation arrived, their faces glowing with the warmth of community and shared devotion. Inside the ancient wooden church, the air was filled with the faint scent of polished pews, candles, and fresh mountain air that slipped in through the cracks of the aging windows. Maria, as always, sat near the front, her Bible clasped in her hands, a serene smile on her face. At her feet lay Rex, his ears occasionally twitching as he dozed peacefully. The service began as it always did, songs of praise filling the sanctuary, echoing through the high wooden beams of the old structure. Maria joined in, her voice soft but steady, her heart lifted by the words she had sung so many times before. The sermon followed, the pastor's words resonating with the small congregation as he spoke of faith in the face of trials. But just as the pastor began to lead the congregation in prayer, a sudden pop echoed through the church, followed by the unsettling sound of crackling. Maria turned her head, her old ears struggling to discern the noise. Then came the unmistakable smell of burning wood. Gasps rippled through the congregation as smoke began to curl from the rafters above. The pastor paused mid-sentence, his voice breaking as he shouted,
"There's a fire, everyone get out quickly."
Panic erupted instantly. The ancient wooden beams of the church, dry and brittle from centuries of exposure, caught fire with alarming speed. Flames leapt across the ceiling, devouring the timbers and sending embers cascading down onto the pews below. Smoke filled the sanctuary, thick and choking, obscuring the exits and disorienting the frightened congregants. People scrambled to their feet, coughing and crying out as they pushed toward the main doors. Parents clutched their children, elders leaned on younger family members, and the once harmonious atmosphere of the church dissolved into chaos. The fire roared, its heat growing unbearable as it consumed everything in its path. Maria remained in her pew, momentarily frozen by the sudden chaos. Her aged body, already stiff and frail, struggled to rise as panic swirled around her. Rex, sensing her distress, stood and pressed his head against her leg, his blind eyes searching for a way to help.
Maria!
Someone shouted through the thickening smoke, but their voice was quickly lost in the cacophony of shouts, screams, and the crackling inferno. The flames moved swiftly, racing down the aisles and consuming the wooden altar. A beam from the ceiling splintered and crashed to the floor, sending a shower of sparks into the air. The heat was oppressive, suffocating, and Maria coughed violently, her vision blurring as tears streamed down her face. The main doors were clogged with panicked villagers trying to escape, their cries mixing with the roar of the flames. Some congregants, disoriented by the smoke, stumbled in the wrong direction, their hands outstretched as they searched desperately for an exit. Maria gripped the edge of the pew, trying to steady herself, but her legs trembled beneath her. She felt the sting of the heat on her skin and the heaviness of the smoke in her lungs. She knew she had to move, but her body refused to cooperate.
Help me, Lord.
She whispered through her coughs, her voice barely audible. Rex, standing resolutely by her side, nudged her hand with his nose, urging her to move. His usual calm demeanor was replaced with a tense urgency as he pawed at her leg, his blind eyes staring into the smoke as though he could see a way through. Around them, the sanctuary was descending into chaos. A group of villagers managed to break open one of the side windows, and a rush of fresh air flooded the space briefly. But the fire was relentless, closing in on all sides. The few who escaped through the window called out for others to follow, but the smoke made it nearly impossible to see or breathe. Maria looked down at Rex, her vision swimming, and placed a trembling hand on his head.
I can't.
She whispered, her voice breaking.
I can't make it.
But Rex refused to let her give up. He barked sharply, a sound that seemed to cut through the cacophony for a brief moment. Then, with surprising strength, he tugged at the hem of her dress with his teeth, pulling insistently. Summoning what little strength she had left, Maria gripped the back of the pew and pushed herself to her feet. Her legs wobbled beneath her, and she leaned heavily on the pew for support, coughing violently as the smoke thickened around her. Rex stayed close, nudging her leg and guiding her as she took one unsteady step after another. The flames crept closer, licking at the edges of the pews and spreading across the sanctuary floor. Another beam splintered and fell, sending sparks flying dangerously close to Maria and Rex. The heat was unbearable, and Maria felt her strength waning with every step. The cries of the villagers who had escaped were faint now, drowned out by the roar of the fire and the sound of collapsing timbers. The exit seemed impossibly far, and Maria's heart sank as she realized she might not make it. But Rex pressed on, his movements deliberate and unyielding, as though guided by a force beyond his own instincts. Amidst the chaos, Maria found herself murmuring a prayer, her words nearly inaudible as her voice cracked with the strain.
Please, Lord, guide us.
Rex barked again, his body tense as he led her toward what seemed to be an opening in the thick wall of smoke. He moved with an uncanny precision, his blind eyes focused on a path that only he could sense. Maria clung to him, her trust in his guidance her only anchor in the storm of fire and fear. As the flames closed in around them, the chaos reached a deafening crescendo, and Maria's strength began to falter. But Rex pressed on, undeterred by the inferno that threatened to consume them. His steady movements and unshakable determination seemed to defy the chaos, a beacon of hope in the midst of the storm. The fire raged on, consuming the sanctuary, but Maria and Rex pressed forward, their fates hanging by a thread. The air was suffocating, thick with smoke and the acrid stench of burning wood. Flames roared all around, their heat searing Maria's skin and stealing what little breath she could manage. She clung to the back of a pew, her frail body trembling as her strength waned. In the chaos and devastation that consumed the sanctuary, It seemed impossible to escape. Yet at her feet, Rex stood resolute, a blind dog in the heart of the fire, undeterred and strangely calm, as though he knew something she did not. Maria coughed violently, tears streaming from her eyes, her vision blurred not only by the smoke but by despair. She had lived through so much, endured loss and hardship with her faith as her anchor. But now in this fiery chaos, doubt crept into her heart. How could she, a frail old woman, find her way out of this inferno? Rex barked, a sharp, commanding sound that cut through the roar of the flames. It startled Maria, jolting her out of her despair. She looked down at him, and though his eyes were cloudy and unseeing, his posture radiated determination. He nudged her leg firmly as if to say, "Don't give up. Trust me." Maria hesitated, her body weak and unsteady, but the unwavering presence of her loyal companion sparked a flicker of hope. Placing her trembling hand on his back, she whispered,
Okay, Rex, I trust you.
What happened next felt almost surreal. Rex, blind and unable to see the chaos around him, began to move with an uncanny precision. His steps were deliberate and sure, his nose to the ground as he sniffed and navigated through the thick smoke and falling debris. It was as if he were guided by an unseen force, his instincts heightened to a level that defied explanation. Maria followed as best she could, leaning on Rex for support and clutching her faith like a lifeline. Every step was a struggle. Her legs ached, her lungs burned, and the heat was almost unbearable. But Rex's steady movements gave her a sense of purpose. He would pause briefly, his ears twitching, before changing direction, leading her away from danger and towards safety. The flames were relentless, consuming everything in their path. Wooden beams splintered and fell, sending sparks flying, and the floor groaned under the strain of the fire. Yet Rex navigated the treacherous terrain as though he could see every obstacle, weaving around fallen timbers and guiding Maria through narrow pathways where the air was slightly clearer. Maria's faith, which had always been her guiding light, took on a new depth in those moments. She prayed silently, her words carried on each labored breath. Lord, I trust you. I trust that you sent Rex to me for this moment. Her trust in God became inseparable from her trust in Rex, the two merging into a profound sense of surrender and hope. At one point, they reached a section of the sanctuary where the flames had nearly sealed off the path. A large beam lay smoldering in their way, and Maria hesitated, her heart sinking. But Rex pressed forward, sniffing at the edge of the debris before finding a narrow gap beneath it. He crawled through, then turned and barked, urging Maria to follow. Maria dropped to her hands and knees, the heat from the beam scorching her arms as she crawled through the tight space. She gasped for air as she emerged on the other side, her hand immediately finding Rex's back.
Good boy.
She rasped, her voice barely audible.
Good boy.
Rex didn't pause to revel in her praise. He continued moving, his focus unwavering, his steps sure. Maria marveled at his determination. How could a dog who couldn't see move with such confidence? It was as if he were being led by something greater than himself, a divine guidance that Maria could feel but not see. The sanctuary was a labyrinth of smoke and fire, and the exits were far from clear. Many congregants had already escaped through the main doors or broken windows, but in the chaos, no one had noticed the small hidden side exit that Rex now led Maria toward. The path was treacherous, littered with debris and shrouded in smoke, but Rex moved forward with an unshakable purpose. Maria stumbled, her strength nearly gone, but Rex slowed and nudged her gently, as if sensing her struggle.
I'm coming.
She whispered, her voice breaking.
I'm with you.
The smoke grew thicker, and Maria's vision darkened at the edges. She clung to Rex's fur, her steps faltering, her body on the verge of collapse. Just as she thought she couldn't go any further, Rex stopped and barked again, a sharp, triumphant sound. Through the haze, Maria saw it, a small door, partially obscured by fallen beams and heavy drapery. It was a side exit she had never noticed before, one that seemed almost hidden by design. How had Rex found it? The question lingered in her mind, but there was no time to ponder. Rex pawed at the door, his urgency unmistakable. Maria, summoning the last reserves of her strength, reached for the handle and pushed. The door creaked open, and fresh air rushed in, cool and life-giving. She stumbled out into the open, collapsing onto the grass as she gasped for breath. Rex followed, his body brushing against hers as he sat beside her, his head tilted upward as though listening to something beyond the earthly noise. Maria lay there for a moment, staring up at the sky, the stars faintly visible through the dissipating smoke. Tears streamed down her face as she reached out and pulled Rex close, her voice trembling.
Thank you.
She whispered, her words directed not only to Rex but to the heavens.
Thank you for leading us.
The church continued to burn behind them, but Maria and Rex were safe. Villagers who had escaped earlier rushed to her side, their faces a mix of relief and astonishment. As they helped her to her feet, Maria held Rex close, her faith stronger than ever. In Rex's unyielding guidance, Maria saw a reflection of the divine. Blind but unwavering, he had led her through the darkness, embodying the faith that had sustained her throughout her life. It was a miracle, one that would be remembered by the village for generations, a testament to the power of faith and the ways in which God works through the most unexpected of messengers. When Maria and Rex emerged from the burning church, the cold night air wrapped around them like a blessing. Maria collapsed onto the grass, coughing and gasping for breath, the fiery glow of the church illuminating her frail form. Rex stayed beside her, his blind eyes turned upward as if seeking confirmation from a force unseen. The once calm mountain village had descended into chaos, but for a moment, time seemed to pause. Villagers and firemen who had been watching the inferno from a safe distance rushed toward Maria and Rex. Their shouts of relief and astonishment broke the silence. Several villagers who had escaped earlier recognized Maria, their eyes widening in disbelief as they processed what they had just witnessed.
How did she make it out?
One man murmured, his voice trembling.
I thought no one else could escape from there.
And the dog?
Another woman interjected, her voice filled with awe.
How could a blind dog lead her through that chaos?
From the outside, the fire seemed an unstoppable force, consuming the old wooden structure in mere moments. The villagers had seen beams collapse, flames swallow the sanctuary, and smoke pour from every crevice. For anyone to navigate through that maze of destruction, especially an elderly woman and a blind dog, seemed impossible. Yet here they were, alive and whole, a sight that defied all logic. Maria was helped to her feet by the firemen, her legs weak and trembling beneath her. She clung tightly to Rex, her other hand grasping the arm of a villager for balance. Her face was streaked with soot and tears, but her eyes shone with something far more profound than exhaustion: gratitude and unwavering faith. One of the firemen, his face etched with wonder, knelt beside Rex and gently patted his head.
I've never seen anything like it.
He said softly.
He led you out of there, didn't he?
Maria nodded, her voice trembling but resolute.
He's blind,
She whispered.
but he saw what I couldn't. He found the way when I couldn't see it. I believe.
She paused, placing her hand on Rex's head as tears filled her eyes.
I believe God guided us both.
The villagers exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of awe and reverence. They had always known Maria for her deep faith, but witnessing this escape felt like something far beyond human effort. Whispers spread quickly through the gathered crowd, calling it a miracle, a divine intervention. As the fire roared behind them, reducing the beloved church to ash, Maria stood with Rex by her side, a living testament to faith and resilience. In the face of death, they had found life. In the heart of chaos, they had found guidance. It was a story the villagers would tell for generations, a story of how, in their darkest hour, faith had lit the way. The morning after the fire, the mountain village awoke to a somber scene. Smoke still lingered in the crisp air, and the charred remains of the church stood like a skeleton against the sky. Yet amidst the devastation, there was a quiet sense of hope, a recognition that something extraordinary had happened. The miracle of Maria and Rex's escape had spread through the village like wildfire, touching the hearts of everyone who heard it. The villagers gathered near the ruins of the church, their faces marked by both grief and determination. Though they mourned the loss of the beloved building that had been the heart of their community for generations, they knew the church was more than just a structure. It was a symbol of their shared faith, And in that moment, they resolved to rebuild, not just the church, but their sense of unity. Maria, despite her frailty, was among them. She stood with Rex at her side, her presence radiating strength and resilience. Though the fire had taken much, it had left her with an unshakable conviction that God had been with her in the flames. Her story, and the role Rex had played in it, became a source of inspiration for the entire village. The effort to rebuild the church began almost immediately. Villagers donated what they could: wood from their own supplies, nails and tools, even small amounts of money despite their modest means. Some brought food and water to sustain the workers, while others offered their skills in carpentry or masonry. The fire had taken much, but it had also reminded the community of the strength they found in each other. Maria, though not physically strong enough to contribute labor, played an integral role in the rebuilding process. She organized prayer gatherings to bless the work and lift the spirits of those involved. She also shared her story with anyone who would listen, reminding them that faith was not just about worship within walls, but about trusting in God's presence in all circumstances. Her words carried weight, and the villagers often paused their work to listen, finding renewed motivation in her unwavering faith. Rex, too, became a constant presence at the site. Though blind, he seemed to sense the energy of the rebuilding effort, weaving through the workers with a quiet confidence that brought smiles to their faces. Children who had always been fond of Rex began calling him the Miracle Dog, a title that quickly caught on. People often stopped to pat his head or offer him treats, a small gesture of gratitude for his role in saving Maria. Maria's survival became a symbol of hope for the village, and she was often approached by those seeking comfort or guidance. Young mothers asked her how to remain steadfast in difficult times, and elderly neighbors sought her advice on maintaining faith in the face of loss. Maria, who had always lived a humble life of service, found herself in a new role as the spiritual matriarch of the village. She spoke often about the night of the fire, recounting how Rex had guided her through the smoke and flames with what she could only describe as divine guidance.
He may not have eyes to see the world,
She would say,
but his heart is open to God's will. That night he showed me what it means to trust completely in him and in the Lord.
her words resonated deeply, not just because of her story, but because of the life she had led. For decades, Maria had been a living example of selflessness and faith, and now her experience in the fire added a miraculous dimension to her already profound influence. The villagers began to see their own struggles in a new light. If Maria and Rex could find a way through the flames, perhaps they too could overcome the challenges they faced. Whether it was the loss of a loved one, financial hardship, or personal doubt. The miracle wasn't just in Maria's survival, it was in the way her story reignited the community's collective faith. As the rebuilding continued, Rex's story became as central to the village's narrative as Maria's. His blindness, once seen as a limitation, was now regarded as a testament to the power of faith. The villagers often remarked on how Rex's actions that night mirrored the very essence of trust in God, moving forward even when the path was unclear, guided by something beyond physical sight. Local children, inspired by Rex's courage, would gather around Maria to hear stories about him. They loved to learn how he had once been a frightened, neglected dog, but had transformed into a symbol of strength and loyalty through Maria's care and love. Parents used Rex's story to teach their children about resilience and the importance of looking beyond appearances to find inner strength. During Sunday services, now held in a temporary open-air space while the church was being rebuilt, the pastor often referenced Rex in his sermons.
Faith
He said during one such service,
is like the blind steps of Rex in that fire. It's not about seeing where you're going, but trusting the one who guides you.
The congregation, many of whom had been directly involved in the rescue or rebuilding, nodded in agreement, their hearts touched by the simple yet profound truth. Rex's fame spread beyond the village as word of the miracle reached nearby towns. People traveled to see him, to hear Maria's story, and to offer their support for the church's reconstruction. Some brought small donations, while others simply came to witness the dog that had become a symbol of spiritual sight. Rex, ever humble in his dog-like way, accepted the attention with quiet grace, his cloudy eyes gazing out at a world he couldn't see, but seemed to understand better than most. Months later, the new church stood tall, its wooden beams freshly hewn, and its interior filled with the warmth of the community's labor and love. On the day of its dedication, the entire village gathered to celebrate, not just the building's completion, but the journey that had brought them to this moment. The fire, though devastating, had kindled a renewed sense of faith and unity among the villagers. Maria was asked to speak during the ceremony, and she stood before the congregation with Rex at her side. Her voice, though soft, carried the strength of her conviction.
This church,
She said,
was a testament to what we can achieve when we work together. But it is also a reminder that faith is not just found within these walls. It is found in the courage to take one step at a time, even when the path is unclear.
She looked down at Rex, her hand resting gently on his head.
This dog, blind as he is, led me to safety because he trusted in something greater than himself. Let him be a reminder to us all. When we cannot see the way, faith will guide us.
As the villagers bowed their heads in prayer, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden light over the new church. In that moment, the village felt whole again, united not just by bricks and mortar, but by the miracle that had touched their lives and the faith that continued to light their way forward. As the months passed, the memory of the fire and the miracle of Maria and Rex's escape remained fresh in the minds of the villagers. The new church, standing tall and resplendent, became not just a place of worship, but a symbol of renewal and resilience. Each plank of wood and every brick seemed to echo the strength of the community, bound together by shared faith and the story that had inspired them all. Maria, though growing frailer with each passing day, continued to be an active presence in the village. She was often seen sitting on the church's new steps, surrounded by children eager to hear her recount the story of the fire. Her words never wavered, and each time she spoke, she emphasized the same truth.
Rex was God's way of showing us that faith can guide us through the darkest times. When we trust in Him, we find strength we didn't know we had.
Villagers began to approach Maria not just for guidance, but also to share their own stories of faith. Her ordeal had opened their hearts, and they saw her survival as a reminder that miracles could happen in their lives too. One young couple, who had struggled with financial troubles, told Maria that they had found new hope and determination to rebuild their lives. Another woman, who had been estranged from her family for years, reconciled with them, inspired by Maria's message of trust and love. Maria's wisdom became a cornerstone of the community's spiritual life. The villagers even began referring to her as their living saint, a title she accepted with humility and a smile.
I'm no saint.
She would often say, her voice gentle.
I'm just someone who has learned to lean on God. And Rex, he's the real hero.
Rex, though blissfully unaware of the magnitude of his actions, continued to be celebrated in the village. People brought him treats, wove garlands of flowers for him to wear, and even painted a small mural of him on the wall of the new church. The image showed Rex with his cloudy eyes, standing proudly beside Maria, both of them surrounded by a halo of light. Beneath the painting, the words were inscribed, "Guided by faith, not by sight." Despite his blindness, Rex seemed to know he was loved. He became a comforting presence at community gatherings, resting his head on children's laps or lying quietly beside Maria during church services. For many, his story became a touchstone, a reminder that even those who seem to lack the means to lead can become instruments of something greater. The first Sunday service in the newly rebuilt church was a day of celebration and reverence. The congregation filled the pews, their voices rising in song as the sunlight streamed through the freshly installed stained glass windows. The pastor, visibly moved by the occasion, delivered a sermon that echoed the themes of faith and perseverance.
Today,
He said,
we celebrate more than the rebuilding of these walls. We celebrate the power of faith to rebuild our lives. This church stands because we believed in something greater than ourselves, just as Maria believed in Rex's guidance on that fateful night. Let us carry this faith forward, knowing that we are never alone, even in our darkest moments.
As the final hymn ended, the newly installed church bell rang out, its clear, resonant tones carrying across the village. It was the first time the bell had rung since the fire, and its sound brought tears to many eyes. For Maria, it was a deeply emotional moment. She closed her eyes, gripping Rex's leash tightly, and whispered a silent prayer of gratitude. In the months that followed, the village decided to create a memorial to commemorate the fire and the miracle that had united them. They chose a spot in the churchyard where a small garden was planted, filled with vibrant flowers and a single oak tree. At the center of the garden stood a bronze statue of Rex, crafted by a local artist. The statue depicted him in mid-step, his head tilted upward as if sensing the way forward. Maria was moved to tears when the statue was unveiled.
This isn't just for Rex.
She said, addressing the gathered crowd.
This is for all of us. It's a reminder that even when we can't see the path, faith can guide us.
The garden became a place of reflection and prayer for the villagers. People often left flowers at the base of Rex's statue, and it wasn't uncommon to see someone sitting quietly on a bench, contemplating the story of the fire and the lessons it had taught them.